Garland Nixon here as the battles change both on the battlefield and in the economic sphere. The U.S. war on everything continues. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I can see. Thanks a lot there, Random Jack. I put that this starts at 10:40 p.m. and it starts at 10:40 a.m. So luckily for me, the viewers of this program are considerably smarter than I am, and much wiser, I might add. All right. So let's talk about the what I'm calling the U.S. war on everything. And I'm just wondering, what happened to the war on terror? I mean, if you have a war at some point, don't you have to declare that you won or lost or something? The U.S. was just like, okay, we're fighting the war on terror. We've got to fight the war on terror. We've got to stop terror. And then they just left Afghanistan and just like no comment anymore. Hey, who won the war on terror? Hey, look over there, Ukraine. It's Putin, right? It was just like gone. It was all. Let's be honest with it, with ourselves. It was all an ATM thing. It was, we're going to take a particular part of the world. There's a lot of gas there. There's strategic areas. We're going to get all of that. And while we're doing that, we're going to fill our pockets. Oh my gosh, it's looking good. But they woke up one day and realized that there were peer competitors that had to be addressed. If you're going to rule the world, you can't have peer competitors. So what we're looking at is, I call it the U.S. war on everything. There's a number of ways to put it. And it really, truly has to some extent adjusted. What happened here was this. The US after 91 were comfortable that they were the world hegemon, that they were completely in charge of everything, controlled the world. Nobody could do anything unless they wanted them to do it. That is economic, military, etc. Right? In the last few years, Russia and China and Iran, other countries, both regional and world on a world scale, have grown economically, grown military, and now the U.S. is woke up one day, too late, I might add, and said, "Look, we got. Well, I'm not. It's not even too late. It's impossible to stop modernity." And said, "We have peer powers. We must confront the peer powers." And that's where it kind of loses me, really. The plan at that point kind of loses me. And I think the reason it loses me is because they don't have one. It's, we must confront the peer powers, the potential peer powers, and somehow, it's that magical thing, kind of like trickle down economics. We're going to give Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates more tax breaks. And some kind of way, we're not really sure how, it's going to trickle down to you. Well, that's the whole thing. We're going to confront Russia and China economically and militarily in some kind of way. How, we're not sure how. They're going to kind of reverse their economic and military and diplomatic advances, and then we'll be in charge again. Now, we're not sure how that happens. And we're not even sure what confrontation means. We just know that some kind of way we're going to maintain power based on our, albeit poorly defined, plan. All right. So what's going on? What happened? What was their plan? Their plan was this. Okay, Russia and China's growing. So with Russia, here's what actually it was. China's the big deal. China's the big problem because they're economically getting to the point where they're as more powerful, maybe at least as powerful as us economically. The difference being China is not as willing to use economic coercion as the United States. So it's like, yeah, you're powerful economically and we're powerful economically, but we're a lot more evil than you are. So we're willing to strangle and choke poor people out, and you're not. Therefore, we're going to win. I think that's the way the U.S. looks at it. We're willing to do terrible, horrible things. We're willing to bite, scratch, and cheat, do anything we can to win. So therefore, our devious, evil methods will triumph over your failure to murder and slaughter and starve people. I truly think, I say that seemingly in jest, but I truly believe that the neocons, intuitively at least, feel that way, that their ruthlessness And ruthless people usually feel like that. Ruthless, and for obvious reasons, ruthless people generally feel that the way to survive in the world is to be ruthless. And that since that's what's required in the world, that their ruthlessness will cause them to triumph over people who aren't willing to go to the extent, lengths that they are. So let's continue. Let's go on. Let's see where we are. I think this update is going to take a few videos, but I give it a little background. Let's start in Ukraine. In the latest thing, so what happens? So the Ukrainians mount a bunch of offenses, right? Offensives in Kharkov and other God knows places. I can't Izium, Slizium, Physium. I beats the hell out of me. I always say you need to go to like these military channels, Brian Berletich and places like that at the New Atlas who understand this stuff better than me. So here's what I see from a broad perspective. The Ukrainians have made some advances. Everything that I read, everything that I've studied, I put it together. This is what I come up with. The Ukrainians have made some advances in eastern Ukraine, and they've taken some towns and they've taken some real estate, basically, right? That's World War II stuff. You take a couple meters of ground and you hold it. And you take a few more meters of ground and you hold it, which if you are out to take back your ground, that makes sense. But there's a few issues when it comes to that in this particular conflict. There's some other dynamics that affect that I think we need to think about. So bottom line, Ukrainian forces have made some, apparently, everything I tell me says they've made some advances in eastern Ukraine. However, they've taken extremely heavy losses. I've read that everywhere. It seems to me it's pretty clear they made some advances. They took some extremely heavy losses. They paid a high price for those advances. However, they're using the fact that they made some advances for part of the information war. And it's like, look at this, we're winning, we made some advances. So over the period of a couple of days, they've made some advances. Now, let me add a dynamic that I think isn't discussed much. Let's look at this. Two things. And these things are inextricably linked. The Russian strategy overall, because remember, strategy versus tactics. Strategy, your overall plan, tactics. What things do you use within the context of that overall plan to achieve your ultimate objectives, right? Your strategy, your tactics are your small moves you make in a bigger strategy, in a larger plan. But ultimately, on the far end of that, there's going to be objectives, right? So the Russians basically said, here's our plan: denazification, demilitarization. Always keep that in mind whenever you're discussing this conflict. Two things: denazification, demilitarization. And all you have to do is look at that and you can figure out how the Russian perceived threat creates their need for this action. They perceive Ukraine as being a staging ground, for Ukraine as being a machine, a military machine to be packed up. I mean, to be set up to attack them on their border in any number of ways. So they said, we're going to get the military out of that, NATO's military out of that. And the other part of it was cultural, in that the U.S. Worked to elevate a very questionable ideology, quite popular in Germany in the 1940s, 30s rather, to strengthen that, to inculcate that throughout Ukrainian society, so that in the long term, Ukraine would be not just an anti-Russian country, but a country of people who despised, who hated Russia, so virulently wanted to just kill every Russian. That was the plan. And so let's look at what's happened in the last few days through that lens. Number one, Ukraine is taking territory, right? Some towns, doesn't appear to be a lot, but they've gotten some territory. They're going to get some PR out of it. However, my understanding is Russia's principal mission was demilitarization, denazification. So if Ukrainians have taken heavy losses, that means the demilitarization, which is to take out their troops and to take out their equipment, their demilitarization, that particular goal is still being met, because if you're taking heavy losses and they want to wipe out your military, then anytime you take heavy losses, then that's a move towards their goal of demilitarization. Now you've taken ground. Here's the thing to think about: the Ukrainians taking ground in eastern Ukraine. There's a difference between taking back, like taking ground, where, for instance, in Syria, where the ISIS people, al-Nusra Front, would take a town, and the people in the town were oppressed, and they couldn't, were hoping and praying that the Syrian troops would come in and get and liberate the town, and the Syrian troops would liberate the town, and the people would celebrate. That's one thing. In eastern Ukraine, you have towns that are, I mean, let's face it, this is somewhat of a civil war. Basically, Russia intervened in a civil war. In reality, that's what happened. They intervened in a civil war. So you have towns now of people who welcome the Russians, not the Ukrainians. So now the Ukrainians are saying, we're going to take back these towns of people who don't want us there, of people who hate our guts. Right? So they're taking towns of people who hate him, people who fear him, people who don't want him there. What have you accomplished? So they're going to take these small towns, and the people there are not going to be like, hooray. They're going to be like, oh my God, when are the Russians going to get back and get these people the hell out of here? We're Russian speaking. In fact, towns full of people who were not allowed to speak their native language because of these troops and what they stood for. So in the long run, you've taken some towns of people that don't want you to be there. You've taken turf only, nothing else. And the people there would do everything they could to get you out of it, or they're running from you, or they're abandoning the towns. So when I look at it, they've taken some turf, and they can, in the short run, get some public relations out of that. But in the long run, what happens? Is this a victory? Did they get anything out? Did they sustain this? I suspect not. I suspect not. And here's why. I mean, it's quite simple. If you're in a war and the other side has air superiority, it is my belief there's no path to victory. Can you possibly get occasionally? I mean, this is, the people who support Ukraine are like, yes, we're on the move, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say over the course of a war that the Ukrainians aren't going to get some towns or turf or something here or there. Yes, they are, right? But if you don't have air superiority, when you get those towns, when you get any kind of an area and you settle into it, what you've got is an area with concentrated troops who will be targeted and attacked. Even if the Russians are like, okay, let's back away from these towns and let's sit for a while and watch them. Let them bring it, whatever. Their supply lines can be attacked. The problem is when your adversary has air superiority, time ain't on your side. They can just sit back from the air, pick off your supply lines, harass and pick off your people. I don't see them holding anything but so long. So there are going to be people that'll be celebrating this. But it's kind of like, was it Zhou Enlai in the 1970s or 80s? I forget what it was, when they asked him what he thought about the French Revolution and the outcome. And he said, it's too early to tell. And I think that, the Ukrainians have had some successes on the battlefield. It's really, to be quite honestly, this is their first successes of any consequence that they can cheer on and say, we got something. They took some towns. Is this any kind of a victory for them? It's too early to tell. I mean, it's just been a day or two. We don't know how much of what's coming out is true. We don't know what we've heard and read, that there were, casualties of biblical proportions. The question is, and we know the Ukrainian hierarchy is certainly willing to take those kind of casualties, but how long can you? The bottom line is this: when you look at Ukraine, you have to say to yourself, at some point they run out of Ukrainians. At some point they run out of cannon fodder, sadly and unfortunately. So bottom line is this: for those people who are freaking out, oh no, one way or the other, hooray, the Ukrainians have taken some towns in eastern Ukraine, oh, boo, the Russians have been destroyed, it's all over, they're going to lose. It's too early to tell. I say give me about a month. About a month from now, let's look back. Let's just say middle of October. the middle of October. Let's look back and see what happened. Because, I mean, to some extent, when you get out in the open and take towns, you're putting yourself in, set up for some level of targeting. Will they be able to hold the towns? What will they do with them? Because here's the next thing. You've got towns that, let me put it to you like this. Let's look at two different sides. On the Russian side, these were towns of Russian speakers that welcomed Russians. So the Russian says, we'll take the towns, we'll inculcate them into Russia. The people are Russian speaking, the people will be happy, and off we'll go. So they actually had a long-term plan that was workable. They get the towns, they get the areas, the people welcome them there, the people become part of their orbit, right? One way or the other. What does Ukraine think? What Ukraine's plan? We take these towns and we hold them. And then what? You just forever, you just hold these towns forever. You hold this ground forever, and you're subject to counterattacks because you know they're coming. You're subject to missile attacks and aerial attacks and artillery because you know they're coming. So you just sit there and hold the town while you're relentlessly attacked for the next month, 6 months, 6 years, 6 billion years, 6 millennia. What? Right. So I just don't see, I see a lot of short-term thinking when it comes to what's happening with the Ukrainians. I see them, as I said, they seem to be making some advances in tactical advances in Eastern Ukraine, but I don't see how that turns into part of a larger strategy. I don't see a larger strategy. I haven't seen a larger strategy. So let's keep in mind that this is, one brick at a time. This wall is being built in all directions, and we will, for those who are either celebrating or panicking, it was way too early to tell. I feel like to some extent, because they don't have the kind of air cover they need, and because the Russians have air superiority and a lot of standoff weapons that they're pulling out here, they're putting their troops out. They've lost a lot of troops, which to me kind of shortens the war. You know what I mean? It's like, you may have heard me talk about this before, like the discussion of how you live your life. Do you party and burn it all out at once and have fun and have a short life with a lot of partying and a blast and fun, and you drinking and cavorting and everything in the world you do, and then, you die earlier? Or do you like do everything you can to be healthy and stay home and sleep, you get, 8 hours of sleep every night, never go out, do anything, and you live longer? Ideally, not saying that works in any particular instance. How do you burn your candle off slowly, or do you slowly burn your candle? I mean, excuse me, or do you quickly just light it up like a stick of dynamite and blow it all up? I think that we will see whether or not the Ukrainians had a plan in that sphere. And I think the Russians, one way or the other, because look, I don't think this is the first bump in the road that Russia has run into. I think when the war first started, Russia had a number of options that they wanted to move on. I think they had the first option that I mean, this is my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but this is my opinion, that their first option didn't move in the direction that they were hoping that they wanted to. They were hoping that they could get in there, that they could work some deals with the local, let's call them tribal lords, as that's what we call them in Afghanistan, but people who with power in various areas, and that they could win this thing without a big battle. Well, that didn't work, and now they've moved on to other things. And I think that Russia has a long-term strategy here, very long-term strategy, because this is about securing their border. And since it's about securing their border, it's not about any given town or any given region along the contact line. It's about how do you win this thing over the long run? And you're going to fight until you win it, because this is an existential threat. There's a big difference here, right? So let's keep an eye on that. Let's get back in about a month and review. In about a month, I want to review these latest offensives through the context of the long-term attempts by Russia to secure their border via control of a significant part of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, the U.S. attempt to use Ukraine as a blunt object against Russia. Now, let's move to the next thing that we're talking about when we talk about the U.S. war on everything. So that's the military. It's what you can see. It's the tip of the iceberg above the water. That's what you can see. You can see the conflict in Ukraine very, very clearly. So that's part of the U.S. war on everything. Or I started to say the U.S. war on multipolarity, but that sounds a little techie. That sounds a little, like inside the Beltway stuff, inside journalism. So I figured I'd just say the war on everything. That's easy enough. All right, off we go. Let's continue. Clearly, Europe has been chosen for a number of reasons, but it's been chosen as the battleground, as ground zero of the battleground for the war on everything, which means since Ukraine was chosen for the U.S. war on everything, for the military battleground, that means that Ukrainians are going to be used as cannon fodder and their country is going to be blown to live in hell. And the U.S. is going to continue, to dispatch Ukrainians by throwing them in front of Russian artillery until they run out of Ukrainians. That's what the Ukrainians' job is. Their job is to die for the neocon project, and that's what they are doing well right now. Sadly and unfortunately, the Ukrainians' job through the lens of the neocons is to be torn to shreds by artillery, and right now they are executing that job quite well. Now, when you go to Europe, it's the same thing. It is the exact same thing in a different sphere. We're now talking about the economic sphere. We're talking about the cultural sphere. We've been dealing with that for a while, but the economic sphere. I mean, we could talk about that. That's been going on in Europe for some time, but the economic sphere. So what's going on there? To sum it up, the U.S. sees Europe as a problem because the Europeans, and they created it themselves. It's a problem that they created after World War II. And I've talked about this before, but I'll use it as a foundation for those who haven't heard me have this discussion before, but I'll make this quick for those who'd be bored by hearing it again. After World War II, there were some agreements. The agreement with the Soviet Union, the Stalin was, we'll take Eastern Europe. It's going to be ours. We're not going to pretend that it's democracy or anything like that. It's ours, and we're taking it, and that's going to be our buffer zone from getting attacked. The West agreement was, okay, we'll take the rest of Western Europe, and it's ours, and we'll do with it as we please. However, we must maintain the illusion to the people of Western Europe that they have democracy, independence, and sovereignty. So the U.S., the difference was the Soviet Union didn't try to maintain an illusion, a false narrative, and as is the nature of the neoliberal project and the project of the empire, they did try to maintain an illusion of the West tried to maintain an illusion of democracy and sovereignty, and now what's really happening in the West is a massive conflict, a massive contradiction. That's really what we're really talking about here. A massive contradiction is coming to its head. And what is the contradiction? Here's the contradiction. Empire, right? Go out, rule the world. And what is an empire, right? An empire, think about an octopus. The octopus's body is in the middle, and all of these tentacles reach out in different directions and can grab things and bring it into the mouth and eat it, right? You say, well, think of your body, your arms here. Your arm can reach out, can grab food, bring it back to the mouth and eat it, right? Think of the empire. My body is the United States. The tentacles would be the military bases, would be the economic power, would be, etc., that can reach out, grab things back to them and put them in my mouth. Reach out and grab coffee and bananas and chocolate and all these things from all of these other countries and bring them back to the empire and eat them and feed and strengthen the empire. So what we have now, but meanwhile, in order to do that, you have to do terrible, terrible things, right? You have to, I'll put it like this: the countries that you're exploiting cannot have democracy, because any country that has true democracy is going to be impossible to exploit, because the people who run the country will be held accountable and will feel accountable to their constituents. So what we're looking at now is this mass contradiction between what happened after World War II, where the U.S. had to maintain the illusion of democracy. At the same time, they executed an empire, a strategy of an empire. So you got an empire that's pretending it's not an empire. And the same thing in the United States. You've got an empire it's necessary to convince the people of the United States they're not an empire. And you've got a natural contradiction between empire and democracy. Empire is by its very nature top down. right? It's empire exists for the elite ruling class. It exists to enrich the elite ruling class. And how does the empire use the little people? It uses them for war. It puts them on a ship to go die somewhere for the elite ruling class. The people are there as fuel to be burned for the elite ruling class. Empire is to enrich and empower the elite ruling class. So a contradiction between empire, a system that is specifically there to enrich the elite ruling class, utilizing violence and things of that nature, right, is now clashing with people in Europe and in the United States that have been convinced that they're living in a bottom-up society, in a society where the constituents make the decisions. Keep in mind something. It's not an accident they were convinced of that. The people in charge had to convince them of that to maintain power. They had to keep them fooled. Now the contradiction is coming unglued. As long as the people in Europe and the people in the United States believed they were in a democracy, the empire would work. The empire would work fine. The contradiction was not exposed. So as long as the people are like, yes, we vote and we choose our leaders, that's fine. And now their leaders will lie to them and go out and steal and rob. And the people in the empire continue to believe it because they're benefiting somewhat from that empire. They're getting the cheap bananas, the cheap coffee, the bean, etc. They don't see the people in Africa, South America, Asia, who are being mistreated for palm oil and bananas and things of that nature. They don't see that. And because they want to believe that they're good people, when any evidence is given to them, they ignore it and turn their back on it. I don't see anything. I don't see anything. Right. And so they then are fed a narrative when people ask, why is it that our country's doing so well and that country that we're getting all the stuff from seems to not be doing well? Shouldn't we be buying stuff from them? Shouldn't they be doing well? Then they're fed a narrative that they want to hear. The narrative is, well, that's easy because you're culturally, intellectually, and everything superior to those people. The reason they're poor in that country that we're getting all the resources from is because you are superior to them and they're inferior. Then the people in the empire can still feel good. Hey, okay, I thought it was maybe we were screwing them, but since we're actually superior to them, and I do want to believe this, all is well, let's keep it up. The contradiction now, for a couple of reasons, but one that we'll get into further, that the U.S. war on everything is, again, we're updating on that, is going awry. So the contradiction becomes obvious as the people wake up and they say, wait a minute, we're looking at the numbers now. The numbers are so high, they can't be denied. $850 billion for the military. We just did $280 billion for the Countering China Act. We did $250 billion for the Countering China Act. For that, we spent $2.3 trillion. And the numbers keep going on and on. 40 billion we're up to 67 billion now for Ukraine. Meanwhile, we've got teachers in the streets in Columbus, Ohio. And why are they? Oh, they're teachers. They want more money. They want No, they're upset because they don't have heating and air conditioning in the classrooms for children. These contradictions become obvious. So now the people, the citizens, look at it and they say, wait a minute, I'm looking at these numbers. My God, trillions we're spending, and my kids going to school and they don't have heating and air conditioning. So the contradiction between, I hate to keep using the same word over and over, but you get the point, between the argument that we are a bottom-up democracy in which the people are responsible to their constituents isn't holding well when the people are saying, we don't want this, we want that, and they can't get it. We want more money spent at home. That's just what we're hearing more and more. We want more money spent at home on our water system, electric system, schools, kids, children, things of that nature. And they can't get it. And they start waking up to the reality that this is not a democracy. So as the citizens of the country become aware that they're not living in a democracy, that's another problem with the U.S. war on everything, the U.S. war on multipolarity. The U.S., let me put it to you like this, very simple. If the U.S. government is going to control the world, it has to control its own people. And it has to control the people in its satellite countries in Europe. Europe has simply become Australia. That's all Europe has. Europe was always Australia. Europe simply now the United States feels threatened, and it's not going to maintain the illusion that Europe's not Australia. You look at it up. You look it up. U.S. overthrew the government of Australia and replaced the prime minister in 1975, and used the Queen of England to do it. So now the Europeans are waking up. Some of them, bit by bit, but they will as the winter goes on, particularly. They're waking up to the reality that just like Australia, they're there for the benefit of the U.S. empire, and now they're simply being disposed of. They're being discarded. The U.S. empire is burning them, using them to keep its war going. This is fuel. We got to keep our war going. What do? We need more people. Throw them in there. Let them die. We need more Europeans. Throw them in there. Let them starve. Let them freeze. And so I don't see an empire. I see empires last a long time. Generally, hundreds of years and things of that nature. The U.S. empire, I would argue, at the height of the empires from 91 to like 2020, 2018, whatever. Because an empire that says we have a ruler, who's in charge? That guy right there, his name is Julius Caesar, whatever, right? Okay, all the people can say, boom, okay, this empire, we know who the boss is, and we know we've got to do what he's told. And that lasts quite a while. But what happens when you have an empire that says, we have an empire? Well, an empire that says, A, we're not an empire, and B, you guys, people at the bottom, are in charge of this empire, and the people at the bottom believe they are. What happens when they don't believe they're in charge of the empire anymore? What happens when they realize that they're not in charge of the empire? Your problems start to really expand, and I think that's time. I think that's what we're looking at now. The all this discussion right now of, the Ukrainians won a couple of battles on the battlefield and they took a couple of towns. There's a big picture here, and in the big picture, I don't see how that changes the overall dynamics. The fact of the matter is, if Russia wants, they can pour some more power in there and squelch that. And over time, how long they're going to be able to hold these things anyway? They're going to get pounded. And the same with what's going on internally. How long are they going to be able to hold back the people who are recognizing that they're not in charge and want to be in charge and have been told they were in charge and have an expectation of democracy? These people have an expectation of democracy, and they're going to try to get it, and they're going to exercise it, and they're going to be angry because they feel like they've been had. So the economic war, Europe was chosen by the U.S. empire for that. And from the perspective of the elite ruling class and the neocons, whatever sacrifice the Europeans have to make in that economic war, it is what it is. That's their job now, which would work if it were still monarchies, which would work if they were, if these were traditional dictatorships, things of that nature. But they're not. What they are their colonies that have been disguised as democracies. And the disguise, they didn't disguise them for themselves. They had to disguise them for the people. Now the people's expectations are running into reality. So now the people are going to say, winter's coming. We don't have food. Disaster's coming for us. We have an expectation that our leaders will act on our behalf. That expectation is running into the reality that you're a colony and your leaders aren't leaders. They are directors. They are governors of colonies. Governors of colonies do not have agency over those colonies. The governor of a colony executes the plans and the orders of whoever's in charge of the colonies. And so what we're looking at now is the war in Europe, the economic war in Europe, is running into, the problem is not Russia. Its problem is not Russia. Its problem is the people of Europe who have an expectation. And let me add this. If Europe were already a bunch of poor countries, they'd be better off because the people wouldn't notice how far, you don't have as far to fall. But these people weren't. They're accustomed to a higher standard of living. They have been told that because they are part of the U.S. empire, they should have an expectation of a higher standard of living. The rug's being snatched and they got a long way to fall, and they're going to hit the bottom hard. And they're then going to be angry. So the question becomes, let's move to the next part, because we've said the war on the battlefield. the political war. I think that's what I was really talking about. I said the economic war. In reality, I wasn't. I was talking about the political war and political contradictions of the US war on everything. And that is, the political war is not between the US and Russia, the US and China, the US and Iran. The political war is between the neocons, the elite ruling class, and the people that they convinced that they were living in a bottom-up society, in some kind of a democracy, that they were running things. That's where the political war is. And then so that contradiction of empire versus between having an empire where you convince the constituents that it's not an empire, it lives in a democracy, that is an explosive dynamic there, a really explosive dynamic. Why is it an explosive dynamic? Because it can and will cause internal unrest. So forgive me for saying that was the economic sphere through which the US war and everything was being waged. In reality, that was the internal political sphere. And now there's an external political sphere too, but we're talking about the internal political sphere. Long term, you can't maintain that. And excuse me, you can't even maintain it in the intermediate term. When you say to yourself, how do things go between now and in the fall? I mean, in the spring. How does the situation play itself out between now and the spring? And it's obvious that the people who are the intermediate, the people, the people in DC have a plan. Their plan is just keep doing it, and who cares how many Europeans suffer and die. The people in the directors, the governors, etc., the people who are in charge of the European colonies have a plan to do what we're told, and who cares how many Europeans die. The people that aren't going to abide by that plan is the actual Europeans. They're going to step up and say, we ain't buying this. So you're looking at this thing going bad internally from the bottom politically. Now, this is important, I think, to think about. It's going to go bad. That leads us to the next sphere, maybe that's the right word, of the US war on everything, the next battleground of the US war on everything. And this is an extremely important one: the war on internal dissent. That's important. There's a war on internal dissent, which is inevitable. It was inevitable that there'd be a war on internal dissent. And here's why. It is created by the contradiction between what's said and what's done. It is created the contradiction between the US saying we are a nation of laws and we're for human rights and all of these things, and we're just a nation, we're not an empire, and we're being run from the bottom up, right? At the same time, they got 850 bases around the world. They are risking the lives and the livelihoods of their citizens and the citizens of their colonies. They're doing all of this at the same time. And that creates the inevitable cauldron that cooks up stews of dissent, right? Cooks up pot after pot of dissent. There's this boiling thing going on internally. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter in this cauldron, and people are boiling and burning. The frogs in the cauldron, right? And it's okay, and they're feeling pretty good, and they're swimming around. The old, boiling a frog slowly. It's getting real hot in this cauldron, and that frog is like, I don't like this. And so what's happening? There are people who are just like, yay, where's my blue and yellow flag? Let's keep going. And they just, hide their head in the sand and pretend that things aren't going bad. But inevitably, there are people like you and me who are going to stick their hands up and say, hey, wait, Will, right here in the back of the room, we got a problem with what's going on and the way it's affecting us, and you're not acting in our best interest. There's going to be inevitable dissent. What that means is, and what does a empire fear the most? Internal uprisings. So there's a war on dissent. The war on dissent is about stopping internal uprisings. And the war on dissent is what? It is, let's control the narrative, because that's all they know how to do. Let's look at a couple different things. Let's look at a couple different stories real quick that have to do with the war on dissent. Let's start here. Look at this. Here's the war on dissent right here. National security search engine. Google's ranks are filled with CIA agents, right? You go down there. Alan McLeod does a fantastic job to the point where he has pictures. Look at this. Meet the ex-CIA agents deciding Facebook's content policy. He actually goes down and he has names and pictures. Jacqueline Lamore, former CIA. She's at trust and safety for Google. You can keep going down. Look at this guy, Jeff Lazarus. Trust and safety, right? Here's another guy. Trust and safety, senior policy advisor. He was formerly cybersecurity policy manager. There he is. Government affairs and public policy. Economic and political analyst, Central Intelligence Agency. I mean, you can keep going down. Michelle Toborowski, ex-Google, former CIA. What does she work? Trust and safety expert. So Alan does it. Political and leadership analyst, CIA. So you can go down, keep going down. Young Suk Lee, right? Same thing. You go down. Manager and analyst, director at CIA. So this is the war on dissent. Google now says we're loaded with CIA agents. Let's do another one. Some more work that was great done. Work that was done low key. How the CIA has infiltrated social media companies with Alan McLeod. That's great, and they go on to talk about it again. They talk about that staff, but not just CIA, but the other social media. Wait a minute, how about this? Here's another one. How one spook-run London college department is training the world's social media managers. Right? It's a spy school. And you can look at this. It's a great article, and you'll find a school for spooks. The London University Department churning out NATO spies, right? Listen to this. I'll just read a little bit of it. At any one time, the department educates around 1,000 students, many of whom have gone to become top military commanders, intelligence chiefs, government officials, both in the West and in countries as disparate as Jordan, Nigeria, and Singapore. But increasingly, large numbers of the war studies graduates are finding employment in the most influential media outlets on both sides of the Atlantic. And in Silicon Valley, chief among the social media companies where war studies graduates hold considerable sway is Facebook, now rebranded as Meta. So we see the war on dissent, a big part of the war on dissent. There we go. How the CIA has infiltrated social media companies. There we go. National security search. Google's ranks are filled with CIA agents. Right? So what we're looking at here is, and this is a very important part, the war on internal dissent, the war on those of us who have a propensity to ask questions, to be suspicious of concentrated power. When you put the power in the hands of a very few people, there are a lot of people such as me and you who are very suspicious of that power. And we suspect that the outcome is going to benefit those people and not us. And in reality, not even benefit them out of their greed and malice. So a couple of things I'll talk about the war on dissent. One of the things that hurt the war on dissent, believe it or not, paradoxically, was COVID. Here's why. When COVID hit, as always now, they didn't recognize that there is a class, however, albeit small, there is a class of people within our society who will always push back. So when COVID started and they said we need to do lockdowns and this and mandate that, blah, 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 that there is a class of people that'll say, I don't trust that. I don't trust the government. I don't trust you. I want them further, that are going to start digging and looking into it. So what they did was they used their control to say, well, we control the social media. You can't say anything we don't want about you to say. You can't ask any questions we don't want you to ask about COVID. As a result, new platforms started to arise. As an example, last week I did a show about you may not have known about this. I did a show about what was it about? Where was one of them? Oh, I know what it was. I had a post. I did a show about this. I had a post, and it was, they didn't, the Ukraine bots flipped out, and next thing you know, Newsweek did an article. Piece of crap that it is. Newsweek did an article and it had my name in it. It basically says this post is a Photoshop, and Garland Nixon shared the post. Right. And I'm like, boy, you don't have a lot to do at Newsweek. You're writing an article about one Twitter post. It's Photoshopped, right? So I did a rebuttal to that. And I did it on YouTube, and I did it on Rockfin. And a friend of mine calls me a few minutes later and he said, "Hey, your rebuttal video is locked. It won't work." And I went on and I tried to play it, and people kept calling me saying, "It's locked. It won't work." And it wouldn't work. Right. So then, because I do everything on Rockfin also, I went to my Rockfin channel. Sorry about that. I went to my Rockfin channel, and it was, everything was still fine. So I tweeted, "Hey, Google, YouTube has censored this video. Go to a true free speech platform, Rockfin, and watch it to find out why." I put that up. Within 5 minutes after putting that up, YouTube unlocked it. Why? Because they were like, "Holy shit! First of all, we're driving people to Rockfin, and we don't want to do that, and we can't stop the video anyway." Again, what happened? You got Rockfin and Rumble, Humble, Tumble. Well, I don't know what the hell all of them are, Odyssey, whatever. You got all of these new platforms that have arisen as a result, I would argue, of COVID, as a result of pushing back against people who are discussing, rebutting the COVID narrative. And some of it was, some of the people rebutting it made a lot of sense. Some of the people rebutting it was purely bullshit. Some of it was somewhere in between. But that is the nature of reality. If people are allowed to have a discussion, some of them will be right, some of them will be wrong. That's the nature of reality. That's healthy. It's a healthy discussion for some people to be right and some people to be wrong. You can't have a discussion where everybody's right. Furthermore, in the context of that discussion, the government was most angry at those who were right and asking valid questions. So, but here's my point about the war on dissent in this particular sphere of the U.S. war on everything. The war on the internal dissent flared up during COVID, but as a result, the people who pushed back developed a entire new system of communications. New platforms arose. People went to Telegram. Telegram grew. New things arose where people could get information out and share information. Right. So the war on dissent, just created the infamous whack-a-mole. You knock them down on YouTube, they pop up on Rockfin. And you knock them down on Google, and they go to some other kind of browser. They go to some other kind of, and then people would share information. Well, we can't do this on YouTube. Go over here to check it out. We can't do this here. Go over there to check it out. So they created alternative avenues and pathways for people. So the war on dissent, they found out, was that the people inside the empire, inside the colonies, aren't as compliant as they need. So now the plan is to do that. But ultimately, here's the problem with that. Ultimately, what that means is the war on dissent is a war on your own people. It is a war. I mean, it is constantly, you've seen it, I've seen it. You get things from Twitter. You've got a complaint against you in Germany. You get things from Facebook. We've got a complaint against you. We're looking at you. It's constant. And what happens is this: I would argue in the long term, these social media platforms, now that they're fully usurped. I don't know if they always ever were or whatever, by the international security state. They're going to die on the vine. People are going to find other things, and eventually they'll go. Twitter, Facebook is nothing right now. It's dying out. Right. Twitter will follow. There'll be new platforms, and sooner or later people will move to the other platforms, and they'll continue this war. And the people in charge will continue to have to burn up their resources on an internal war. Their war outside, their war against Russia, their war against China, their war against Iran, their war against everybody ever out there. Right. North Korea, Venezuela, on, and all the forces in Latin America that want to go in a different direction, and they're leaning towards Russia and China, on and on and on. And ultimately, internally, they have to fight the same kind of war to suppress people who are doing the same thing as the people on the outside. The people on the outside are saying, "This doesn't work for us. It's not good for all of us. We don't like it. We want something different. We don't trust it." The people internally are saying the same thing. "This doesn't work for us. We don't trust it. It doesn't work." And now this machine, this neocon machine, is now at war with the people outside. It's at war with the people inside, but it's a narrative war. So ultimately, when I look at how that's going, the question is, short term versus long term. Short term, you pack all of the social media, news media, on and on and on, all the narrative people with those who you want, and you can control the narrative that goes out. But while you do that, there is a let's call them the resistance, right? There is a narrative resistance. There is a reality resistance, a resistance that says you can tell me this, but I'm going to try to find other. I'm going to try to weigh what you tell me versus what I can find. And so, in the sphere of the battle against internal dissent, I don't think they're doing so well. I think they feel like they're in charge, but this is going bad. One of the things I think that is important, it's critical right now. I read an article that it was about what's going on with the FBI, and it said something like there was a poll: 56% of Americans feel like the FBI is Joe Biden's personal Gestapo or whatever. Right? I can believe that. I can believe that because it's not. But keep in mind something: people who are still trapped in the Republican and Democrat mindset say it's Joe Biden's, like they work for Joe Biden, like Joe Biden is in charge of this thing. If you believe that, you don't understand how this thing works. This machine would just as soon crush and kill Joe Biden if he becomes a liability as it would you or me. This is not Joe Biden's. This is something that's there to make this. The FBI is there to control the dissent in the empire. That's what it always was. It's the Ministry of Defense of Control of the Empire. So what are they doing? You've got people who are viewed as a threat to the empire. When Joe Biden comes out and says the MAGA people are a threat, Trump is a threat, what they really mean, they're right. There are people who are saying, we don't buy into all of the neocon stuff. Sadly, unfortunately, they buy into some of the neoliberal neocon bullshit, but not all of it. There's some areas that they don't buy into it. So what do they hate? They'll talk about the left. I remember I spoke at an event, CPI USA. And afterwards, they were socialists. They asked me to come. I'm not a member of the Socialist Party or Libertarian Party or any other party. I'm not a member of a party. But if somebody asks me to speak, I don't care if the Libertarians, the Socialists, the MAGA people, I don't care who it is. If the Atlantic Council asked me to speak, I'd speak because I got things to say. Afterwards, what was interesting is Newsweek. A couple of things happened. Number one is the machine went after the guy, Caleb Maupin. That's why I got my I support Caleb hat. Caleb Maupin. The machine went after the guy who put together that event. Right? They wrote an article in Newsweek, and interestingly enough, this is what's interesting. If you look at the article said they're just like this is just like CPAC. There's no difference between the lefty socialists and the right nationalists in CPAC. Well, you can like or dislike either one of them, but to say that there's no ideological difference is preposterous. However, to the neocons, and they even had Alexander Vindman, who is Ukrainian. So they, the reality is, to them there is no difference. To us, we see the ideological difference. Oh no, they believe ideologically in very different things. To the powers that be, there is no difference because they see them as a threat. The socialists are not going to go along they do not believe in the empire and imperialism, right? The MAGA people are going to ask some questions they don't want to ask still. And yet they're going to say, yeah, well, we don't know about this or that. They're going to be at least in some areas, they're going to be pragmatic. And they're going to ask some questions. Remember Trump, for all of the issues I got with Trump, in some areas, he would say, what about NATO? In the beginning, he started off, what the hell do we need NATO for? What are they doing here already? It was a valid question. And although Trump, in a lot of ways, and is an imperialist himself, he would ask some legitimate questions that the imperialists could not allow to be asked. So now they're, of course, at war with the MAGA people. They're at war with the socialists. And there's no difference. Even though these groups are dramatically different, to them, the only thing they see is here's a group that's going to oppose and resist our attempt to lie to the American people and to the people in the colonies of Europe, to lie to them and convince them that they're living, that they have some input, that they have some say in their lives. So I think that was a great lesson. That particular article was a good lesson that people on the right and people on the left should keep in mind, should read it and say, well, they don't see us as any different. So we have to recognize that instead of just saying we hate each other, and then the The people in power say, hooray, you idiots, keep fighting, to say, regardless of our differences, we are our lives are going to be made like a living hell with these people, and we really need to resist against it, and we need to worry about our differences later. But right now we got to look at who people who are trying to destroy all of us. They'll kill us all if we allow them. I mean, nuclear war, whatever the hell, or famine, you name it. We get finished with these bastards, they'll, God only knows what they're cooking up in some bio research lab now. We can't stand around and wait for that. So at any rate, I was just preaching a little there, but you get the point. I think that's a reasonable point to make. So we've hit that. We've hit economic. We haven't really hit economic. Let's do that. Because I need to do a show on the Queen of England, and that's one particular sphere, but I think I'll do that later on tonight. But let's look at economic. The United States decided, and keep in mind something, before I get into this, I got to say something. I'm not going to be all that much longer. It is obvious at this point that the U.S. empire, that would include, its colonies, one of the reasons that the U.S. empire has been able to be a wealthy empire. I mean, and I mean, I don't care. People don't want to talk about this. They don't want to accept it. But I don't give a shit. This is getting obvious, is by exploiting the resources of weaker countries, by saying your country doesn't have the power to stop me from exploiting your country. I'm going to overthrow your government. I'm going to put some compliant puppets in there, and then I'm going to steal all your resources. And then we have cheap resources, and we can continue to get cheap resources and to sell our goods competitively and to make money to service our people, to do everything we need, because countries, Ghana, Namibia, Bolivia, whatever, right? We're going to get compliant puppets in there. And through that, we're going to have part of the world that lives quite well and part of the world that has to suffer in order for that part of the world to live well. That's what we were looking at. That's what we've been looking at. Whether Americans and Europeans want to admit it or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter. That's become obvious to me. The problem is, and this is why the neocons, the imperialists, the leaders of the U.S. empire always had this problem, because that was so. They had to have this Wolfowitz doctrine that said no other country could rise up and become powerful. If Russia, if China comes out and they offer an alternative, if you've got a country over here, country X, and that country wants to sell, I don't know, let's just say bananas, whatever, and the U.S. says, give it to us or else we'll kill you, which is what the U.S. traditionally has done. The same thing the British Empire did, right? And Russia and China come along and say, we'll give you a deal. Now, that may be 60-40. We're going to get 60%. You're going to get 40%. But that's a whole hell of a lot better over there. We'll develop the stuff. We'll build airports. We'll build this and that. And those bastards over there just say, give us what we want, or we'll kill you. What do you think? And they're going to say to Russia and China, you kidding me? We can get 40%. And over there, we'll get nothing but blown to smithereens. We'll take it. So the problem is, once peer economic competitors arise, it interferes with the ability of the empire to go to these countries and to just exploit them. That's the big problem. And they see it as an existential threat. It's to some extent, aren't they, right? What happens if you have a country, if you have a society that lives well off the pain of others, and now those others that you're living well off have other options? Don't work out real well for it. Does it? You never go to people that be mad. Oh, Garland, what are you talking about? We're exploiting others. I don't really care. These things are becoming obvious. And those of us, for emotional reasons, there are those of us in the West who, for emotional reasons, don't want to accept that. It would really be painful for us to look at that reality, to realize that we live in a country and we live in an area of the world that profits over the pain of others. And we already have done that. There was the sugar plantations in the Caribbean that made a fortune, and they took that money and then they fueled the cotton plantations in tobacco plantations, and they made a fortune off of that. And then came mainly the Industrial Revolution. That was like a big agro revolution. The Industrial Revolution comes, and what do? They make slavery not quite the same. Slavery in the agricultural revolution was pure slavery. It was pure capitalism, right? It was free labor. So what do? The Industrial Revolution comes along, and we're like, here's what we're going to do. The oligarchs, we're going to give them a smidgen bit more, but they're still going to be kind of slaves to an extent. We'll build towns. They'll live in the factory, company towns, company store. They'll owe all their money to us, blah, 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 blah. So they had to do a little teeny bit more. And they did it to survive. They did it to make it, and it came unions and all. And then that's where we are now. And now the people, and so what happened was the labor made some gains. Those gains have been reversed, and now labor's pissed. And at the same time, the United States is trying to, at a time where the economic foundation of the US empire is being challenged by peer competitors, the people within the U.S. empire are waking up to the reality that they've been had about politically, how much power they have, that they've been had about the economic system they have been executing and who it's going to benefit and all that kinds of stuff. So the people in the middle, these neocons, they're looking in every different direction, man. They got big problems. And meanwhile, they got another problem, Europe. At the same time, the only way they can get through this and get where they want to be, which there is no hope for that, but from their perspective, their only hope is to sacrifice Europe. Economic war, and Europe, it will be sacrificed. And it doesn't matter. Europe is empowering and enriching both Russia and China. There's this big economy here, and Russia and China are selling stuff to this huge economy, and they're getting more and more powerful. The US looks at that and says, we can't have that. And so they say, how can we do that? Well, we can destroy Russia's. See, if we just say to the Europeans, stop buying Russia and China stuff and just live miserably in a life of hell, the Europeans are going to say, as a populace, are going to say no. So instead, we got to say, these people are bad and evil and scary. And so therefore, you have a reason to give up your way of life. Right, to give up your living standards, and then somehow they're supposed to accept that, which for a couple of months they will, but those blue and yellow flags are starting to go out the damn window now, and they got to close the window soon because they're cold. And so as the time comes here, what appears to be in this winter an economic clash, wherein the economics of the everyday people in the US empire and the colonies say we're not willing to suffer economic pain, is really a political clash. Because really what's happening is the people in the US colonies are saying, we expect leaders that will look out for our best interests. Our leaders are not looking out for our best interests. That is manifested, that is expressed in the economic pain that we're having. The economic pain is not the problem. The poverty is not the problem. The inflation is not the problem. None of those are problems. Those are the symptoms of the problem. The problem is we have Annalena Baerbock and Robert Harbach. Why's everybody Bach? Running around saying, we don't care what the damn people say. They ain't getting it. They're going to starve and freeze. And it doesn't matter what the voters say. The problem is not that you're starving and freezing. The problem is that you wouldn't be starving and freezing if you actually had independent sovereignty and leaders who were accountable to you. The way to resolve that issue is to ensure that you have leaders that act in your best interest. So the political clash, and I'm getting towards the end, the political clash, the clash in Europe is going to be a political one between the people's expectations. Again, what do we get back to? What am I getting back to from the very beginning? Between the contradiction, the people's expectation of democracy, that their leaders are accountable to them and look out for their best interest. And their expectation is because that's what they've been told. That expectation this winter will run into the reality that they're living in a colony of the United States, and that their leaders are beholden to the rulers in the United States. Therefore, their lives, their living standards, their culture, their everything is to be in the same way right now. Just if you're in Europe, consider yourself like that poor bastard who's in the Ukrainian army, who they've said run across that field. And you're like, yeah, but I see artillery is like going everywhere. And they're like, that ain't your problem, brother. You're at the bottom. We figure we're going to send 1,000 of you people charging across the field where artillery is exploding everywhere. The way we see it, maybe 100 of you will get through. Maybe. And that 100, and if we send 1,000 here, and 10,000 through, right, charging across fields, we need 1,000 soldiers to attack that little settlement. We figure, hey, 90% of you will die. That gives us 1,000 soldiers. Go ahead. take off. And the people are looking at them saying, I don't like these numbers. That's what the people of Europe have to wake up and realize. That's the same thing that's happening to them. They're saying, okay, economically, we want to charge the Russians with your livelihood, with your culture, with your world, with your reality. And you say, but my family's going to starve to death. Exactly. But we figure most families in Europe will starve to death, but maybe 10% of them will survive. And then we really got the Russians, because we've done away with most of the population of Europe, which means they can't make money off of them anymore, which means they don't have to buy heat. Boy, we'll really fix the Russians if most of you people die and suffer and you all become impoverished, and the Russians won't have much of a market there, and we'll be looking good. Let's move forward with this plan. And then again, in a democracy, that can't happen because the leaders represent the people. And the people, so keep in mind, the contradiction to keep an eye on, the contradiction to understand, is the contradiction between the US empire, not, as with all empires, not acting on behalf of its citizens, the contradiction between that and the illusion that's been created to their citizens that this is a democracy that looks out on your best behalf. And I know a lot of people, especially a lot of conservatives, that are holding on to this. They just can't let go. No, this is the greatest democracy in the world. No, this is a democracy. No, Garland, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Well, you need to wake up. If you don't have to believe me, just keep watching. What the hell kind of democracy has a war on dissent? What the hell kind of a democracy has a war on those people in its own country who are questioning the narratives of the leaders? That's a healthy country. What the hell kind of a democracy says to their people? Annalena Baerbock says to the Germans, say, you're going to suffer, you're going to die, you're going to freeze, but I don't care what the voters say. We're moving forward for what we're told by the people in the U.S. empire. What the hell kind of democracy does that? None. So it's not a democracy. Fool yourself. Believe what you want to, but you'll find out in the long run. And I think the dissenters here, like me, are going to continue, discussing this, talking about this, and it's because, to be quite frank with me, I just enjoy talking about it. I just enjoy the conversation. That's my agenda. My agenda is to have fun in life, and I enjoy having fun. I enjoy the conversation. Here we are. All right. Thanks a lot. We do have, let's go to Rockfin, and we're going to hit. We've got a couple of people who were nice enough, and let's go. Okay. David Boteller has a tip. Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate that. I think I got another one. Here we go. JVB says, another hit it out of the park. My favorite analysis. Thanks a lot, Garland. Oh, yeah, thanks a lot. I didn't think I hit it out of the park. I thought I'd just run off my stinking yap, as always. Sparky, good old Sparky. But thanks a lot, David. Wow. Okay. Sparky says, King Charles II transported my direct paternal ancestor to the New World to be a slave. We'll see how King Charles III works out. Thanks a lot there. Good old, the Sparkster is on top of things, as always. Thanks a lot, Sparky. And I want to thank everybody as I go over the super chats. Don't forget, super chats are, whatever you can do as a super chat is greatly appreciated. Everybody who does what they can to keep the channel going and help things out. I got some big new things going on, starting maybe hopefully next Wednesday, and some other things we're working on. So thanks a lot. Kev's Incal says, had you on live in the shop again, open the eyes of my clientele. Great work and synopsis, my friend. Peace X. Thanks a lot, Kevin's Ink House. Man, I'd love to go there sometime. To go to where are you guys? Ireland, Scotland, wherever you are. I need to get there sometime. Next time I go. Although I'm saying, I was talking to somebody about going to London recently, and I'm thinking, yeah, but the person I was talking to is actually a Russian journalist, and we were talking about going to London for the Queen's death and all that. And my friend, who was a Russian journalist, said, I don't know if I'll be able to go. I don't know what's going on because I'm Russian. That's a sad state of affairs, isn't it? Can you imagine in this day and age if Garland Nixon said, if they said, hey, Garland, let's go over to so-and-so and check out the Queen's funeral. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'll be able to go. Why? Because they don't allow Black people, right? You'd be like, what the hell? That's the way I see it. Hey, I'd like to go over there and cover that. Sure, let's do it. Well, I can't go. Why? They don't allow my kind in there. They don't allow Russians. That's where the U.S. is like returning to some really racist roots there. You know what I mean? Oh, no, there's no racism here. We're perfectly racist. What about Russians? I hate all of them. Every last Russian, no matter what. These darn Slavs, they got to go. Yeah, okay. All righty then. All right. It's pretty terrible, in my opinion. And now here I am, a black person, and I'm looking at like a really kind, dear friend, a nice Russian person that I talk to every single day. Hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I got to look at them with like my head down, like, yeah, I guess we Americans are, you know what I mean? Kind of in shame. I'm a black person. I'm not supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be on the other side of that. They're supposed to be looking at me like, hey, Garland, sorry about what happened. The cops dragged you out of the car and beat you mercilessly. You know, hey, it kind of works, you know, kind of unfair. And then I'm supposed to be, you know, feel bad. Yeah, well, you know, and then the other person says, well, let me buy you a drink. And I'm like, hey, good idea, right? Okay. So I'm the guy that's supposed to be, if anybody's getting discriminated against around here, darn it, it better be me to be discriminating against my Russian friends. I'm the guy, as Brandon always says, I'm the guy. I did that. So let's get this straight. You stinking bastards in the EU that do not discriminate against my Russian friend. I'm used to it, at least. I've been around, you know what I mean? I've had things happen in my life that have made me say, wow, that ain't right. So, you know, let's get back to the American way. Darn it, if we're going to discriminate against people, let's not let it be Russians, because, you know, I don't know why. I just think it ain't fair to discriminate against anybody. All right, let's move. Let's move on. This whole bit. Can you believe this, though? I got to throw that out there. I brought that up, but I got to throw that out there. Can you believe this shit? Can you, you know, looking at Europeans and the Americans now, can you believe this? It's like, yes, we are standing up for human rights and for the rights of LGBTQ and lots of other acronyms and people, the minorities and all this stuff. They're bullshit. They're not, right? But they say that, right? Like everybody must be treated the same. We oppose racism and discrimination, blah, 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 blah. And you say, oh, great. Hey, there's my Russian friend. No, we don't allow their kind of somebody get a rope. There's a Russian. We got to hang that there Russian. And they can't see that the world is aghast at what they're doing. They can't see it. Interesting to me, interesting. And now I'm like, it is, I tell you what's interesting though, to actually be on the other side of the conversation. You know what I mean? Where you grow up and you're in an area where I'm in America. Trust me when I tell you this, I don't care what you say. I have seen no shortage of bad things when it comes to the issue of racism and discrimination. Yes, I have, right? Personally. But it's like I'm on that side of it. So I'm like, yeah, that shit ain't fair. The man is holding me down, right? I can do that, right? But when you're looking and you're talking to your Russian friend who's a kind little person, and you're like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, I don't know if I can go here because, oh yeah, well, I can't go there because I'm Russian and blah blah blah. I do understood they turn it to journalism, so Russian journalists can travel or something. But what does that mean? Do they even consider like Sputnik or RT, or do they consider them journalists? I don't even know what the hell it means. And should they go, or somebody going to attack them or beat the hell out of them, kill them or something if they go there? I'd be scared to death if I was a Russian person to go to, you know, I'd be concerned at least. Right. But, you know, it's weird to be here having someone tell me, a black person, yeah, they don't allow my kind around here, to look and see, yes, they're having tennis matches or blah, blah, blah. What about it? Well, they decided no Ruskies are allowed. A person who plays tennis or basketball their whole life, they practice to get in shape, they get good at it, they become a professional, and now they want to compete wherever. And you say, no, you can't. Why? Because you were born ethnically Russian. Again, it exposes the bullshit. It exposes the lies of we're there for human decency. And let me ask you this. Let's be honest about that. This. If you've still got enough racist tendencies in you to say, I hate this group, whatever group it is, we hate them, we don't like them, we're going to discriminate against them, we're going to legitimately set up Jim Crow this is what they are. I just get Jim Krowski or Jim Krowovich, right? We're going to set up these Jim Crow anti-Russian laws. You still got it in you. Joe Biden and these bastards and these leaders. I'm not saying the people of the country are a bunch of racists. I'm saying the leaders, the Biden people, these bullshitters, these same liberals that have been telling us how much they love every group for I don't know how long. And if you really look at them now, as soon as the Ukraine war started, they started saying stuff like, well, you know, these people are blonde haired and blue eyes and they're Christians and they're like us. This is terrible. I mean, come on. I mean, yeah. Do you blow up brown people and Muslims? Certainly. But these are white people dying. Well, are the Russians white people? Yeah, they're not the right white people. It always comes down to you got to shave it a little bit closer. Yeah, they're human beings, but they're the wrong color. Oh, they're the right color, but they're the wrong religion. Oh, they're the right religion because they're Christians, but they're the wrong kind of that religion. They're Orthodox. Oh, okay, they're the right religion, they're right this, but they were born in the wrong country. Oh, they're Slavs. Oh, there's something. You keep whittling it down closer and closer and closer to find a reason to hate people, which means that in your soul, there is the ability to hate people that are different for no other reason than because they're different. And the people in Europe should be seeing that about their leaders. That's another thing that should be rejected. And there are those of us who are saying we're rejecting that. We're not going to accept, I don't like Russians. Russians can't do this or that. And they have to, Russians, well, they can only play tennis if they'll sign a document that they hate Putin or some such crazy. They literally had people where at times where they were saying, yes, the Russian person, and if they want to be a part of this band or whatever the hell it is, they're going to have to sign a document. They're going to have to pledge that they oppose Putin. What kind of bullshit is that? It's something from the 17th, 16th century. It's absurd and preposterous. That's where our leaders are. Wake up, people. Wake up. Because you know what? In the same way, during American racism, the slave people or whatever would hate black people, but they hated even worse white people who they called N-word lovers. White people who said, "Look, I don't think this is right." They hated them even worse. They were a big problem. So right now, these people that hate Russians, those of us who say that I'm right, we're not going to go along with you stinking, neoliberals hating people just because of their ethnicity. They hate us worse than they do the Russians. Because we're the ones in their society who can cause problems, who can stir up problems by saying to other people, by making it obvious to other people, this is not something that ethically and morally you should support. We should not have things saying this group of people can't do this. Now we understand that these postage stamp sized countries on the Russian border, Slovakia, Latvia, whatever the hell that ends in IA, these little city sized states that don't even really have a country that are going to be sacrificed, that are being sacrificed even as we speak by the US empire, that these countries hate Russians and they're going to lead the charge, and they're taking their asses right over the cliff too. These lemmings are going right over the damn cliff, right over the cliff. In fact, they're going to fall apart. But the bottom line is that these countries, we expect that from them. But the Britons and the Frances and the Germanys and the United States, who claim they're so anti-racism, anti-discrimination, are leading the charge of discrimination and racism against the Russians. And what, unfortunately, the dumbass Poles and the Ukrainians don't realize is that they're Slavs too, and that their lives will be wasted and thrown away the same. The U.S. empire don't give a damn about them. I think it's important to have that conversation. And here I don't give a damn. I'll talk about anything. I don't care if people like it or not. Let's keep going. Any more? Kevin Zinkhouse, thanks a lot. Scotland, and you're welcome, Garland. Oh, Scott, there you go. Scotland, where they drink scotch. Emery Chan, want to see daily digest of current events, please. 15 minutes, great analysis as usual. A daily digest of current events. You know what? I might start doing that because that's what I do. I cover all of that stuff. Let me continue to look any more. Another super chat. And Harry C. Smith says, so on top of destroying their own industrial sectors, the EU is now bent on banning tourism from Europe's biggest tourist market too. Absolutely. They don't give a crap. It's the thing about it is this: they're out of control. I always use the metaphor like a drowning man. A man is in the water and reaching, grabbing for anything he can to pull himself up, anything he can grab. He's out of control. So the European leadership is not under control right now. They've lost it, and it's because they see the reality that the world is changing, and they're not going to be able to do. Their masters in the U.S. aren't going to be able to do anything they want to. So yes, they're destroying their own industrial sectors, but they're not thinking. See, when you say, are you destroying your industrial sector? Are you killing your tourism? Are you doing this? The thing about it is this: those are rational questions. Our leaders aren't acting in a rational manner. They're acting out of emotion and fear. Oh my God, the Russians are getting more powerful. The Chinese are getting more powerful. This country, that country, all these countries are getting more powerful. So they're not acting out of rationality. If they were acting out of rationality, we get completely different outcomes. They're acting out of emotion and fear. and anxiety. So what you're going to get is one, it's like a person who, who's got mental illness a lot of times. They're going to act in a way that is counterproductive. I remember seeing a homeless person, right? And it was obviously this person was mentally ill, talking to himself. We've all seen that, right? And he asked this woman for money. Can I have $2? And the woman said, sorry, I don't have it. And he screamed at her, right? Well, that's actually counterproductive, because anybody standing around is going to look and saying, I ain't giving that guy any money. I'm running from him because he's acting crazy. He wasn't acting, he really was crazy. But he didn't stop to think about it. He acted in a way that was counterproductive because he wasn't acting in a rational manner. Our leaders aren't acting rationally. They're acting out of fear. So it's like, what can we throw it? They're getting together in a room and they're saying, what can we throw at Russia? Right. And there's nobody in the room to say, think about this, to say, we have to consider the fallout from that. We have to consider how it's going to hurt us. Think about COVID. We're going to do lockdown. A discussion should have been, and I don't think this is controversial, the discussion about lockdowns should have been, this is what we think the positive side parts of a lockdown is. However, there are some negative parts of it. There's some negative things. We need to discuss those. We need to weigh the interests of what the lockdowns will give us versus the dangers and problems we can have from the lockdown, right? That's a rational thing to do. That's a scientific way of getting somewhere, right? How it's a problem. There's various problems. If you've ever took courses on problem solving, there are various problem solving models. The define one, where you start with the D is define the problem, E is evaluate the alternatives, and each letter is an acronym that stands for things, right? What you have to do in there, though, is it's a problem solving model. It's meant to be a rational problem solving model, and a scientific one where you can work through your possibilities, and in the end you enact some kind of a plan, and then you evaluate afterwards as you're going, where are we within the plan? Are we reaching our ultimate goal? They don't even know what their goal is. So, they don't know what their plan is. So all they're going to do is say, we're going to do this to Russia. Ooh, we got them. Somebody's going to call. We need to cut off Russian gas. Yes, cut off all Russian gas. We're going to do that. We need to stop taking Russian oil as of December 31st. Yes. Stop taking Russian oil. And we need to put a cap on Russian gas. Now, there's Russia sitting over there saying, if you put a cap on that on this gas, you ain't get no more. They don't hear that. There's no one in the room with them to say, hey, guys, we need to consider the negative parts of our plan. Russia said this. They don't have anybody in the room to do that. So all they do is you're the person in the room saying they're hurting their biggest tourist market. They don't have anybody in the room to do that. They got a bunch of idiots in the room charging on. Is there anything else we can do against Russia? Yeah, we'll stop doing importing water from Russia. Yeah, but we don't have any water anymore. There's nobody to say, yeah, but we don't have any other water. We'll all die of thirst. There's nobody in the room to say that. All they do is charge forward. Yes, what else can we do? So what they're going to do, they're going to continue coming up with more and more things they can do to hurt Russia. And just like the lockdowns and all the other things they did during COVID, they're going to find out how it's going to affect them in real time. That's what's going to do. All the mandates, all the things that they've gone, all the decisions that they've made in COVID, now in real time, we'll find out. I mean, you shut your economy down for long periods of time. How's that going to affect us in the long term? Well, we're going to find out. The mandates that you had for various things are going to be problems from that. We'll find out. All of those things that happen, I'm not here to say there will or won't be problems. I'm saying we're going to find out in real time, because there was nobody to do a legitimate evaluation of them and say, these things that we've done, perhaps we could consider the fallout before we do them. That ain't there. And so we'll continue. They're going to think about this. They're going to cut off Russian oil at the end of December in the middle of winter. I would, if I'm in the room, I'd stick my hand up. Hey, guys, there could be repercussions that we're not prepared for. There's none of that. So all you're going to see is whenever somebody says, let's do something else to get Russia, everybody in the room is going to cheer. We don't want Russian tourists. The problem is, what's funny, too, is they're like, can we make it through the winter? But what happens when the winter's over? First of all, you can't. Well, you're going to get through the winter one way or the other. The question is, the winter's going to come and the winter's going to go. The question is, what is Europe going to look like during and after the winter? What is it going to look like economically? What is it going to look like socially? What is it going to look like politically during and after the winter? Can we get through the winter? Of course you'll get through the winter. Some of you will, some of you won't. Some of you may freeze to death. But the winter, let's face it, the winter is going to do what it does. It's going to come and it's going to go, right? The question becomes, what does the situation look like before, during, and after the winter? And during the winter, and you'll even see this, they're going to be in dire straits. God knows we don't know what we're doing. Things are falling apart. This is terrible. And during that time, they're still going to be coming up with more ways to get Russia. What's the problem? People are starving, freezing to death by the tens of thousands. They're coming into the capital to burn the place down. Yeah, but Ursula von der Leyen has a plan for a new way to hurt Russia. We're all going to make snowballs. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell the protesters that instead of fighting back against the government, that they're all to make icy snowballs and throw them eastward towards Russia in a symbolic move. I mean, they might as well at this point. That's the kind of crap we're looking at. And they're not thinking about it, and there's a price to pay. Sparky, 2 of my teammates were going to run and jump in the 1980 Olympics. Carter boycotted them. So it was as if my teammates' whole lives had gone to waste. Yeah, that's terrible stuff, isn't it? It's terrible the way they do athletes. Anymore. And that, I guess that's about it. Wow, I've been on for a long time, gang. Let me take a couple of people that aren't fragile, can take heat and cold pretty well. However, the only thing I have a big problem with is high humidity. However, I can take dry heat and cold with no problem. Thanks a lot, old quantum alchemist. You read about that, reminds me of a book, right? The Alchemist, great book. I think it's Paul Coelho. That was a great book. I really enjoyed The Alchemist. If you like that, there's another one called Ishmael. You know me, I've read a million books, and you start talking about philosophy books. Ishmael is another great one. If you want 2 brilliant books on philosophy, I would, and I don't know which one I'd go for first. I'd go with them even. The Alchemist is incredible, but Ishmael is incredible also. It's about a friggin' gorilla who's a philosopher. It's really, really deep. You'd love that book. It's one of those ones that's written so well, you start reading it and you can't. I think it's Daniel Quinn. I'm not sure. All right. At any rate, Quinn, isn't that the guy on that was stabbing on Jaws? Quinn that got eaten. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. People are always trying to see him doing a show, for God's sake. All right. Thanks a lot, you all. Don't forget, patreon.com/Garland Nixon. If you can go to Patreon and you can do 3, 5, 7, 100, a million, whatever you can do a month is greatly appreciated. Everybody, there's 348 people. That means I should have 348 people smashing that like button, and all 348 of you who are currently on, do me a favor. If you are not on my Rockfin page, go to Rockfin, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, and you can become a subscriber. It's free, or a member for $9.99 a month. I really appreciate that. That's a great help to the channel. We've got buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH. You can cash at me, $ dcradioman, any number of ways. If you can afford it, I certainly appreciate it. If you can't, I understand. Just keep enjoying the channel, and bless you, and hope things work out well for you. But if you can help the channel, that's great. Make sure you're a Rockfin, and even if you're watching it on Twitter, make sure you go to my Rockfin. And the great thing I like about Rockfin is people can do tips anytime. So working on some things. Thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate it. Everybody have a great Saturday. My God, I've been on an hour and a half. I've been running my yap nonstop. I think you have heard enough of me. Peace. I'm out.